This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I'm Todd Kirk. I'm joined by my ever-present co-host, Casey Trujillo, who I guarantee you is a person who has never read the terms and conditions on anything in his entire life. Casey, glad to have you here, as always, my friend.
I'm going to strike that answer.
What?
With that, I did read the terms and conditions of my marriage, so that is the one thing
okay.
I have there. But in regards to software, no, I never read that.
Okay, that's good. At least you know the terms and conditions for your marital relationship. So that's good. Casey, glad to have you here. We are joined by an awesome guest that I'm super pumped to have on today, Eleni Vorvis, and I'm super pumped to have her here. You know, she has a Greek name, but a lot of really, really great insights in change management, and so we're super happy to have you on the show. So, Eleni, welcome to the SaaS Therapy Show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, I know that you've spent about 20 years in GTM working with different teams and partners and customer success. But what are some of the things that our audience should know about you before we dive in?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm very people-oriented, relationship-oriented. So I was really excited to kind of stumble into customer success. I got my first official role in partner success, and it wasn't even called that back in 2009. And so it was nice to be able to find a place where I felt really at home and could really leverage the strengths that I had, accumulated over a few years of working and in school, and I'd gotten my MBA as well. And then just really things that I liked when I was younger was trying to figure out what do I want to be when I grow up? So it's nice to have landed in CS. I think other things about me is the personal side of stuff. Like I'm an avid reader. I had started a book club back when I worked for Black Duck Software. That lasted for about a year, and then people moved on to different jobs and we kind of didn't keep on with it. So I'm thinking of maybe resurrecting and starting another book club because I just like to read on my own, but it's more fun when you pick a book or get to choose for other people to read something that you may not necessarily have chosen for yourself. So that's kind of fun. I'm a big foodie. So being Greek, we socialize around food all the time. So I keep a list of the latest restaurants in the Boston area. I live in Cambridge, right between Harvard and MIT. So there's a lot of new spots in Cambridge that are always opening up. We finally got a Michelin star in Boston, finally. And it's a very small 12-seater Japanese restaurant. So not surprised that a sushi spot actually got the first Michelin star in Boston. Yeah.
That's a great list. Now, I just feel inclined, Todd did not ask me this question, but I want to tell a little bit about myself. So for the past, I would say 35 years, I know people are looking at me saying, Casey, but you're only 30 years old. How could this be since you were born? But
if you're watching the video and you see the mustache on his face right now, no one is thinking that. So.
But I love working out. And, I have been at what I consider my ideal weight for some time. I wake up, I'm the 5 a.m.er at the gym, a couple hours every day. I do not miss, right? But there's one vice that I do have, and it is McDonald's. And I promise everyone this story is going to come back to something. So I love a crispy Diet Coke, and I love a sausage egg McMuffin. I do two eggs. And so that way I always know it's fresh. So if you order 2 eggs, then they have to cook it fresh. So for those people that are like, McDonald's is gross. If you order it fresh, it's not bad. You got 1 minute to eat it. But anyways, I'm getting to the point of the story here, Todd. So in January and February, when I go to the McDonald's, there's no one there. And I just always had seen this and I always noticed it. And then one day I asked, my friend Rob, who's always, taking my money, I said, Rob, what is the deal with no one actually being here? I just zip through in January and February, but March hits. And he goes, well, that's when everyone gives up on their goals. So we brought Eleni in. She's one of the top 100 CSM strategists. And we're here to talk about change. Eleni, why is change so hard? Why, and we're going to hit January here in just a second. We're going to set goals. We're going to set initiatives. We're going to fail probably in the first 60 days. Why is change the thing that you're passionate about talking? Why are we going to have this be kind of our theme for today? Change management, doing these different things. Why is it so hard for us?
Because we're human, right? And I think we want to say that the thing that when we work for a SaaS company, right, we believe in the product, we believe in the mission. Our customers are buying because they have a problem that they need to solve and they want to get an outcome with our software. So they've bought into signing the deal, right? And we think, great, they're bought in on the philosophy. And I think we just very quickly forget that they're going to be humans who are then going to be told, hey, guess what? You now get to start to use this brand new tool. You're going to have to go through an implementation process, like all this stuff. And we think it's going to just be easy. And it's not, because as humans, we resist change. Like, just think about trying even to first start working out and building that like muscle memory. I also do strength training. I've been doing it for the last 3 years. I wish I'd been doing that for, longer, but at least I got started. And I remember the first 6 months to a year were really hard because my brain had to get used to, okay, this is a new way of doing things. And I had to remind myself constantly why I was doing it. So I think change management is hard, particularly in SaaS, because we don't think about the psychological impact that it has on the people who are going to be using the software. It's not just about business, it's about what motivates us. And there's science behind that, and just things that we know in our daily lives that we could apply to SaaS change management as well. It's not easy. It takes time. But if you have a recipe that you can use over and over again with your customers, it does work and they understand and are kind of brought along on the journey versus forced to use it, which is the case in most places. And then
Yeah.
it fails. Like, there's research out there. I was reading something from McKinsey, like 70% of organizational change initiatives will fail because of employee resistance and the lack of management support. That's a really high number. So when you work in customer success in SaaS, that can be a little bit deflating, because our main job is to get people to change and want to use something for the better, because it can change the way they work. It can get them promoted. It can help them get to their business outcomes. But it's hard. You have to fight against a lot of people's uh, resistance to it, and them just thinking, well, this is not for me, and I'm going to not use it until somebody really forces me to.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes in the change management world that it's stuck with me for years is, everybody wants to change, they just don't want to do anything differently. And so the reason why I think that quote is so good is because, you think about Casey's example, like the resistance piece usually doesn't kick in right away, because most people they get hyped up, they get excited about all the possibilities of what could be. And then when they realize that the value wasn't as high as they expected, or the effort it was going to take to get there was way higher than they expected, then they're less likely to sustain that change over the long term. And so for me, one of the things that I struggle with a lot of SaaS leaders is what is the best way to tackle that change problem? Because there is the value conversation, right? I can try to paint this beautiful picture of where you're going to go, right? To borrow from Casey's, New Year's resolution, just imagine what it's going to look like in summer whenever you've got the beach bod that you always wanted, but that value, if you realize that it's going to be really hard to get there, or you don't know the pathway to sustain it, then you lose steam pretty quickly and you start to give up, you start to get discouraged, you're less likely to continue. And a lot of the SaaS companies that I work with, there's different things that you can pull on, right? You could enhance your product to make it easier, or you could spin up a services team to take a lot of the heavy burden off of the customer, or have the CSM create all these great change management plans. And I don't know what the best answer is in what situation, but do you have any ideas for us of maybe how we can get past a lot of the barriers that tend to cause us to get stuck and prevent that sustained change that we want to see in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think there's depending on who you talk to, they'll give you a slightly different answer. But I think for me, in what I've been doing in my role as a fractional consultant, and just being in CS, is thinking about communicating this information as early on as you can, like even during the sales process, to say this is going to require change management, and getting that buy-in from the decision maker, from the team, to say it is going to be different for people to have to do XYZ now. You will 100% get resistance. So having a very honest conversation with, here are all the things that the users are going to tell you about why they don't want to use the product, all the excuses. Let's just put that out there. and even talk to them about it and say, you're coming to this meeting and we know here are all the reasons why you're going to tell us that this is not going to be easy to use. You already have your process. You don't have time for this, etc. If you just call out what's going to be the resistance, then talk them through, here is why this is going to be better for you. It's going to save you time. It's going to help increase profits, etc. But get down to what's in it for the person in the role. So really understanding and walking a day in their shoes helps them to start to think about, okay, I'm aware that this change is happening. You get them in a state that's more of a, I desire to change. We all desire to change. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm comfortable with the way I'm doing things. If they want to lose weight, or if they want to, eat more meals at home and start cooking at home, if they want to start a new hobby, everybody has that desire, but it can seem overwhelming without the knowledge. So the other piece is, what knowledge can we provide again earlier on in the process? I think it's all about when you start to help those individuals navigate through that change, to help them realize that they have the ability to use this product because of the things you were mentioning, Todd. It's easy to use. We've got instant help. You can now talk to an AI bot, right? All of these technical ways in which we're making it easier. But fundamentally, we have to talk about the why behind the change and the hurdles that they may come across and what we're going to do when we stumble, and have a plan for that. And that requires getting management involved. I think that's a big thing that people overlook. They're like, oh, the product is so easy to use. These users will be fine. There doesn't need to be somebody on the customer side to oversee the change management. There absolutely has to be, whether it's somebody who is responsible for organizational change within the company or plays the role of, I've seen a lot of great program managers who also do really good with change management, but someone who's going to be able to talk to us in CS about, here's what we're seeing on our end, how do we work together, and then having those executives on the customer side intervene. I worked with a customer when I was fully employed as a CS leader, and before I was promoted, I worked as an individual contributor with customers. We had an executive sponsor who essentially said, I know this is going to be hard. We were working with procurement people, buyers who had been in the role for 20 years. So imagine you're doing something as a procurement person for 20 years. You're used to picking up the phone, you call your vendors that you have relationships with, or you email them and you get a quote. But now you're being told you have to use this procurement system, which is going to get you more bids, save money, which is, procurement people love that and they love a discount. So he had said, I can probably point out the people that are going to resist this change, and I am going to hold them accountable. And I'm basically going to tell this whole organization, this is not a thing that's optional. It is mandatory. And if it's something that you're going to resist using, I'm going to know about it. And we're going to have a conversation. And I really hope it doesn't get to that point. So he was very invested in adopting the product, implementing it. We worked with those teams to also break it down. So we didn't work with everybody at once. We actually worked with the most challenging people first. And I think that's another thing that people don't think about. They always go to who's going to be the power user? Who's going to be the champion? That person is self-sufficient and they can figure it out. You have to think about who's going to drag everybody down with them when they start complaining. I'm a big vocab person, so I'm also a grammar geek. Who's the curmudgeon? So now in working with customers, I say, let's identify who is that person. And every customer I've worked with can immediately think of one or two people that are going to be the ones that complain. So you really need to bring them along first. And we did that with this large implementation. And there's one individual. And at first she was resistant. And then we had office hours and she would come on and she would answer the questions. And that felt incredible to see someone who was not really bought in and was like, who are you? I have to now work with you, to then really coming along and seeing how it could plug into her workflow, to then answering her peers' questions. And that's, I think, the best example of change management. And it was because we were communicating often. We had that executive sponsor involved, someone to really hold them accountable, because we're the vendor, right, in their eyes. Like, we don't love that word, but that's who we are. We can only do so much with change management. It needs to be reinforced on their end, incentives around it, metrics, recognition. I think that's the other part of it as well.
Todd, you want to have a follow-up question?
Well, so that last bit there, I think, is really an important call out there, that one of the things that I think too many CSMs fail to recognize is you can't force your customer to change. They have to do it themselves, right? And what have you seen? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things that are really good, right? Converting the naysayer and the detractor into a promoter and a champion, the curmudgeon into a superhero. I don't know, whatever we want to say there. But we've got that angle. That's really good. Executive sponsorship, huge, right? Have you seen anything else in particular that are either pitfalls that we should avoid or bridges we should build to help the customer feel like they can take control of their own destiny better?
Yeah, I think it's the role that if we look at cross-functional alignment, so we're the SaaS provider, right? The other thing too, I think that can help us so that the customer then isn't getting this very wonky journey that they're going through, is making sure that everybody is aligned, like understanding, talking to the product team and saying, okay, you're really building with what the customer has in mind, right? We take their feedback. We also have our roadmaps and we kind of balance those things. But the more that we can talk about ways in which we can make the product easier, or we can adapt features that are going to work for a majority of the customers, or I would say a majority of customers, that if you add up the ARR, it's significant. And if they're going to be changes, right, there's always changes to the product. That's the other thing too. For our customers, we roll out new features, then we expect them to just be able to use them right away. Or there's a new integration, or there's just other things that we're building for them. So the earlier that product can loop us in to walk us through, here are the changes that are coming. Let's maybe have one or two users like take a look. Let's send them over some information. Let's get them prepared. So it's this communicating again early and giving them the information in advance versus waiting until the last minute and be like, oh, we just did a release. And sometimes when you work for a smaller company, it's not possible because you have a very lean team and you're working quickly. But I think you can start to put just some fundamental processes in place with product. Marketing can also help. Sales can help our customers, right, with setting more realistic expectations, not over promising things that may not be technically possible. And so I think if we can get our house in order, it also helps the customer feel more comfortable with going through a consistent experience no matter who they talk to. Because I think we've all been there where the customer is upset with their CSM and they go and pick up the phone and be like, talk to the salesperson and say, what happened here? You told me it was going to be XYZ, and now I have to work with Eleni. I have to work with her team, and they're not being very accommodating to me. When the salesperson doesn't back up the CS team and just says, you know what, you're right. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to go talk to them, or I'll figure this out and we'll make sure it happens. That misalignment is bad because then the customer knows they can go around you. It's when they pick up the phone and call sales and the salesperson says, well, here's what we're trying to do to help you out and have that consistent message. Then they're like, okay, well, what CS is telling me is the truth, and we're going to continue to build that relationship. And then there are going to be times where we make mistakes and we don't go through the change process well. And I think we just have to acknowledge that and be empathetic and just talk to the customer about it and have an honest conversation and say, you know what? We did mess up, and here's what we're going to do to make it better, because it's not going to be smooth every time. The larger the company, the more stakeholders, the more challenging it is.
Okay, so 2 questions for you. And again, Eleni, we set this podcast up as SaaS therapy, so it's something you just walk yourself through. So if you're like, Casey, I totally disagree, that's okay. You're in a safe place. We can just talk through things, right? And we can walk through this. So 2 things I have questions about, and you can take these in any order. Question number 1 is, how the heck do you do change management at a scalable way with your smaller customers? Like, I get what you're saying. I have a CS person that is working with 10, 15 accounts. Get that, makes sense. Get the self-inflicted, we do it all the time. But what if I'm a CS person, I have 1,000 accounts or 500 accounts, and I'm in this tech touch, they call it, right? How do I do change at all? Is that even humanly possible? So that's question number 1. Question number 2, how do we get sales on board to be change agents? Because gosh darn it, they just want to sell something and they don't really care if it renews unless there's an incentive for them, right? So actually, how do we get sales as part of this also? So question 1, can I even do this in a digital approach? Is that even possible with SIM managing a ton of accounts? And number 2, how have you seen people get sales on board without just incentivizing them to care about that first year renewal?
Yeah, two great questions. I think the first one, I think it is possible. I'm not a digital or skilled expert, but I'm out there seeing what the experts are talking about. I think AI is helping us a lot. You don't have to have a change management plan that is unique to every single customer. There's going to be common things that you can implement and you can leverage with AI to be able to send out information to these customers or whatever is being built in the product as well, right? From a digital motion, there's times when like the CSM barely needs to be involved because the user is understanding, okay, here is what I need to do. And I think some companies have gotten really clever with their messaging and the information that they do send over, that people are likely to read those messages because they are wanting the path of least resistance, right? Just give me the information that I need. I'm going to consume it and I'm going to do what I need to do. So I think there's many ways and many companies out there that are trying to address that today. And, is it going to be 100% perfect? No, but you test the messaging on like a smaller subset of those customers. I was on a webinar the other day. I can't remember which one, but they were trying to do that to say, just start with like the ones that, if you mess up a little bit, it'll be okay. Test that messaging and then you'll be surprised that it will work. And then you just keep going up and up. And then sometimes you can even use it for customers where you thought this has to be a one-to-one individual thing. So I think there's a lot that can be done. And then two is a question I am highly, highly passionate about because, we can't blame salespeople for doing what they're doing, right? Because they have a comp plan and they're just exhibiting the behavior that gets them to the path to get paid. So you first have to understand how are they being compensated in order to understand what's motivating them. And then there are ways that you can, between CS and sales leadership, talk about, well, how do we create motivating factors so that the deals that we're selling are going to be more likely to have longevity and not something that we have to have a conversation about, like, should we even have booked this deal in the first place and we're going to debook it and CS isn't going to get a hit because it was so terrible, et cetera. So I think that that's really important. Like I remember when I was at Black Duck, we were trying to align our plans and work together with sales because it was something that was like constantly evolving. And I remember like working with a salesperson who was trying to think at the time to push, it was like a multi-year deal or renewal. And I was trying to do something else. And then finally I said, you know what? I feel like you're being pretty adamant about this. And you mentioned something about compensation. I said, talk to me about how you're being comped. And then I realized, okay, he's being compensated for this 3-year deal and he's still involved with the customer. And so he's kind of on the hook for a percentage of it. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So I kind of went back and was like talking to my boss about it. And I figured, okay, if we're going to be doing these things, then we probably need to make sure that how CS is being compensated is also communicated over to sales so that we can work together. Because there were some deals that were enterprise where we had to work closely together. So the comp was evolving. We tried a few things. Again, it's not everything's going to work, but if you can help people understand that there's a win for everybody to get additional variable compensation, then I think folks start to think about, okay, I'm going to bring in this prospect. Are they the right fit? Especially if like you work for a company where you do get paid when the customer renews, or they hold a portion of your commission if the customer doesn't renew. I think some companies have been bold enough to do that. Not everybody's doing that across the board. But if they're still on the hook within the first year, I think that that's great. And then there's just the communication from sales leadership to say, you know what, we churned this customer. Let's talk about why they weren't a good fit. So the other thing is, if sales isn't given stories as to why this didn't work out, they're going to continue to sell in the way that they're selling. So just as much as we need them to do certain things, they need CS to also be very transparent and share that information, not in a way of like, you did this thing wrong. Again, it goes into like change manager. You're not going to go in there and say, how could you have sold this deal? Like, what are you, an idiot? You have to be very, lead with like empathy, explain the situation and say, here's what happened with this customer. And I think there are ways that we can be looking at our ICP differently. Here is what would be good. And then sharing the wins, saying, this customer just renewed. Thank you so much for being transparent with them during the sales process and, talking to them about XYZ. That really helped. And now we can take this success story and you can leverage it in your conversations with prospects. Or this is now a person who's going to be referring you. So giving them not only here's what went wrong and how do we fix it, but here are the things that worked really well. I think that helps. And the more we can understand each other's worlds and what we're doing and how we're motivated and compensated, that really helps. Like, it was very eye-opening for me. I was like, okay, this now makes sense. And now I just need to stop and ask why, and not get like upset and be like, this person just wants to come in and blow up this deal. In smaller companies, sometimes it's the founders. So you have to have a very candid conversation with the founder to say, okay, I'm hearing something different here. Like, what's the reason behind your approach? And let's talk about this so that we can be aligned. Because the last thing you want to do is go into a renewal conversation and they have one idea in mind and you have another idea. And then the customer's like, do these two people even work for the same company? Because that has also happened to me.
Yeah, I actually think one of the hardest parts about change management, especially if you work for a software vendor, is that if you're in CS, you're trying to manage the change management process for the customer, but there's oftentimes a ton of change that we need to go through internally inside of our own organizations. And, Satya Nadella, he's the CEO of Microsoft, he says that it's actually the hardest part usually to unlearn something rather than is to learn something. And so one of the things that I'm curious about is, what are some of the things that we need to unlearn? Meaning, what are the things that are preventing us from actually making the change in the long term? That like either, conventional wisdom or expectations or standards or processes that we have just adopted internally, or that we've never really gotten aligned on, and that we need to somehow unlearn those behaviors. Because I think that's oftentimes an extra barrier, right? There's all the things we need to actually change, which is where we want to get to, but man, we have really potentially deep-seated like thoughts of how things need to be, and we hold on to these things that we probably need to be more willing to let go of. So do you have any thoughts on that, Eleni, of as far as things that we need to also unlearn? Not just like, man, how do we get to this new place, but how do we get rid of the things that are bogging us down right now?
Yeah, I think sometimes the things that bog us down is knowledge that we think is truth. So it's like having to unlearn, oh, I heard this thing from so and so, and they know what they're talking about, so it has to be true. I think it's the unlearning of just taking something as fact when it might not be fact. Because how many times has someone just heard, I think especially in the days when we were in person and you can hear your peer talking about XYZ on the phone, they're on a sales call, they say one thing, you kind of just get it into your talk track, and then if no one is telling you this is not true, then you're going to continue to use it. So it's like maybe if something doesn't sound absolutely right to you, question it, ask why, maybe be like, where is this information housed? Like, is this actually written down like as a fact? So I think it's unlearning this habit of just taking someone's word for something because they've been at the company for 10 years.
Yeah.
They know a lot, but they're not always going to be right, or something has shifted. I think it's just unlearning of like those habits, or the habits of, we're a startup, so we're just going to like move fast, break things. It's like sometimes you do need to slow down in order to speed up. And that's a really hard thing to unlearn, especially if you've got like a customer who's yelling at you, then like marketing needs something, or like sales has the pressure of, it's quarter end or year end and they're like trying to close a deal, but it's let's slow down a little bit. Let's ask questions. Like, that's always been my philosophy. And I know some people are sometimes they're like, well, we don't have time for that, but we do have time if we skip curiosity and we skip the why, or where is this information, how can I learn more, tell me how this maybe impacts X, Y, and Z. If we can all start doing that versus like, oh, I'm just gonna grab this thing and keep going on. Right. I think that's where like mistakes happen. Then just people get in the habit of, I'm just going to do this by myself in a silo. And it probably turns out maybe two other people were also working on this. So that's like the other thing with change management. It's like, let's figure out who is working on what so we can share information instead of keeping it to ourselves. Because it's just like, because it's a fast-paced world where I'm not going to share because I want to stay employed, especially in the layoffs that are happening. So it's like, how do we remember we need to just pause, ask questions, and just do the things we tell our customers to do. So I'm learning there's no magic thing. You just have to, it's repetition. It's repetition. It's writing it down. It's making sure people have the opportunity to ask questions about it. It's revisiting again. And I think it's communicating it in various formats because not everybody's learning the same way.
Yeah, that's
You have to
fantastic.
unlearn this, like, we're just going to put it out there and people just need to do it. No, that's
Right.
not how it's going to work. It's just a repetition, communication, and just let's slow down just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I
Just
love
a
it.
little bit in the SaaS world, right? Because if I think some founders are listening to this, probably we don't have time to slow down. But trust me, it is in your best interest because you're going to figure something out, or you're going to identify a potential problem that you can stop versus just like going full steam ahead.
Yeah, I always like to say that there's two sides of a coin. There's a heads and there's a tails. There's a time to go slow down. There's a time to go fast, and it just it's going to at times depend upon the situation of what's going on, right? So I love that feedback. I've been historically always on the sales side, so I've asked this question to hundreds of guests, and I want to get your take on this. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's obviously an answer of it depends, but I'm just curious, if all things are the same, what would be your advice? Okay. Compensation. Do you compensate your AEs on first year renewals? So question number one, I always like to ask mine in two questions. So question number one, should your AEs be comped on first year renewals because you want to make sure that they're selling the right deals and they're invested? I've had things to be debated either way. Question number two, I'm a sales rep. I sell a 3-year deal. So it's guaranteed to renew for 3 years. How do you compensate the CS person for money that's guaranteed? The CS person isn't renewing the deals. They're going to happen. It's contractually obligated for the 3 years. How do you keep the CSM invested where they're not just worrying for the last 6 months of the contract and saying, okay, I got to make sure it renews because now it counts for me? Those are my two questions. I've asked that a ton of times with different guests. I want to get your take on, again, all things equal, what's just your gut reaction? We're sitting at a bar, I ask you that question, and you're like, oh, yeah, here's some free advice. Here's how I'd approach it.
Yeah, I think that salespeople should be compensated. I think it's going to vary on like how much that compensation is, but as long as it's something that is that works, that also doesn't have them micromanaging the renewal. So that's what it's kind of like, it depends. I think yes, with certain parameters, and then clear expectations on who is doing what when it comes to that renewal and when it comes to the relationship, because I can see where it could get messy, or where the salesperson wants to stay entangled, but they really shouldn't. But I think that can help with bringing in customers that are going to renew. And then for the 3-year deal, I mean, right, they're not going to get paid until that renewal. They've got so many other customers that they're working on. I think that you can probably put some incentives in place on time to value for the customer and them hitting their outcomes. So even though it is a 3-year deal, in CS, we're always planning with our customers on what's happening for you in this calendar year, and that gets broken down into quarterly increments. So I think creating a structure where there is that additional, variable comp, it's different than the way that you would pay somebody for revenue that's coming in. But if a customer is hitting certain milestones, you can do some MBO based stuff, which keeps them motivated. Or do they become referenceable? I've worked in places where if they're referenceable, that counts towards a certain bucket of things that you have to meet as a CSM. And you know what? It doesn't always have to be monetary compensation. There's just other ways, like recognition. Like I used to work for Achievers, an employee recognition platform. That was like my first traditional CSM job, and that was like 10 years ago. They've evolved so much since then. But what I remember from my time there was even just getting recognized by your peers, by leadership, by others for a customer doing something as a result of like the relationship that you've built, a milestone that they've hit, that goes a really long way too these days. Because I think we're in such a rush that we forget to thank people. And I think even just little things could also be something that motivates CSMs. I think we don't necessarily feel like, oh, we have to get some sort of money, even though it's a 3-year deal. You just know, like, okay, you keep on this customer. The 1-year ones are kind of going to be the ones that you need to focus on a little bit stronger. But I always liked having the multi-year deals because you do have more time. You can establish the relationship, and then that will create upside for you. So that's the other side of the coin. You can just be like, well, you're going to work towards an upside. So after those 3 years, you then get that bigger payout because you have built out a plan that lets them go beyond their use case for the 3 years. So I've been in instances personally as a CSM where that has happened, and that resulted in a great upsell and a transition. We had a customer on like our legacy product, moved on to the new product. I got to work with the AE on it, and that was like very fulfilling. It was a lot of work. I knew it wasn't going to pay off for quite some time, but that's okay, because ultimately it's like it's a team sport, and you're going to get paid in different ways. And so I look at it that way. Kind of a long-winded answer, and I was going a little bit back and forth, but I just think there's a couple things to consider in it. It's not always about the money. And I think in CS, as long as the comp plan is fair and people are motivated in the work that they do, then you're fine with those multi-year deals and waiting and getting that potentially bigger upside, or less stress to have to prove something in the first 12 months. Because it's impossible. If the implementation takes 6 months, then you only have 6 months. So I'm of the philosophy, if you're an enterprise company, a lot of them can't do more than 1-year deals, so that kind of sucks. But for the ones that can, I'm like, bring it on, because this allows us to really get embedded in their workflow and to be able to work together to make something good happen.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I would say that I am the type of person. Well, I'll tell you, actually, this is kind of a funny story. I think this is going to go against maybe what I was going to say. But when I first started working at Brainstorm, I've been here a long time. Been here like 13 years. And when I first started working here, I started gaining a lot of weight, and I felt like I needed something to help motivate me to change the direction of what I was doing. And so I made an agreement with some colleagues that if I didn't lose a certain amount of weight within a certain time period, that they could shave my head however they wanted. And so I created a negative incentive for myself, and that was really motivating for me. And a positive incentive, I didn't even think to include it. Right? Like the only thing that mattered to me was the fear of having them shave my head. By the way, I lost a lot of weight. I was like a pound away, and they still shaved my head. It was really sad. But I made a really big change at the time. And so one of the things that I always think about is there's the intrinsic motivator that you have internally, right? And I love that you actually brought up a couple of different examples, like the motivation of looking back at a job well done and seeing the transition that you made and the satisfaction that you get as a CSM of knowing that you helped the customer, right? That's like intrinsic motivation. That's something that comes from you internally. Then there's an extrinsic motivator, which is like money or compensation or recognition, or in my case, punishment, a fear of having my head get shaved. And so what have you found? Like, how do you balance that? Because I think there's one of the things that's hard is like what motivates you is different for every single person. And the thing that's going to have a really big impact is going to really depend on how you hire and how you put somebody into a specific role. If they're really going to be intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated, and if it's more a fear of consequence than it is a fear of or hope for a reward. And so, how do you balance that? I'm curious your thoughts on what you look for in people, and how do you try to balance the types of motivating factors that you put in front of them?
Yeah. I mean, it's so when you're looking for somebody in CS, I think to me it becomes like pretty evident if somebody is coming in and they're just a pure salesperson and they're there for the money. Then you're kind of questioning, well, are they going to be working with that customer in a way that they are
shot at me? Did she smile at me?
empathizing with them and just being able to listen to all the things, right? Part of what we do is like we're having to listen to these customers vent. We have to solve their problems. There's a lot coming our way. And you can't just simply like force them into a decision if they're not ready to go down that path. So things sometimes go in like various directions. So I always look for people that kind of have like a mix of the skills. They're not afraid to have a conversation with someone about money, about a renewal, about a potential expansion of a use case, because they've got that curiosity, right? They like asking questions. They're going to be good at discovery. They're not going to be afraid to push the envelope, because then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have people maybe that are too nice and are like, well, I can't. They're going to help answer all of their, slew of emails and get their support tickets closed. But that's also not going to help when it comes to bringing in renewals, if like you're now having responsibility for that. And more companies are shifting to that model of commercial responsibility. So people are like, I don't want to be a salesperson. I'm like, hate to break it to you. We're all in sales. We all represent a brand, and we're all here to get people to do things that are in their best interest. They may not realize it at the time,
Right.
to lead them down a path because they want to get a certain outcome. And that's going to be the thing. So I think it's just trying to gauge where people are at and what skills are going to need coming in. And then motivating factors, I think it's always going to be a combination. And people will they'll tell you that through the interview process when you get to know them. Are they going to are they going to ask a lot of questions about the comp? Are they going to be one that's going to negotiate hard on that piece? Then you'll be like, okay, this person is motivated by money, versus others come in with just this, they want to help customers, right? They just have passion about like, there's a problem they need to solve. I'm going to help them. I'm going to be strategic about it. I'm going to build these relationships, and I'm here for that portion. And okay, I'll do the renewal part. I'll like learn on that stuff. It'll come, but they're more focused on like, I'm going to build the relationship and the foundation. And that's what I'm here to do. And then those individuals are motivated by helping their customers get promoted, helping their customers hit their goals. They probably enjoy recognition or the opportunity to take on like additional responsibilities that help them get to that next level in their career too. Because some people, right, want to aspire to leadership or to be a team lead. So you'd have to have those conversations with people. And I always say, like, if you're going to be a people leader, you do want to know what each person is motivated by. And it always falls into a couple buckets. It's not like you're going to get like 12 different answers.
Right. That's a great answer. Well, this has been amazing. Again, for any of our change management experts out there, this is hopefully you've gotten some awareness, you created some desire, you want some more knowledge, right? We're going to do some of that AdCar stuff from ProSci, but we always like to end our call or our podcast every time with a little bit of homework. We let you be the therapist. So, Eleni, if you could give one bit of homework to our guests that they would go do, what would be the piece of homework that you would give to each listener?
Oh, that's another good question. You guys are asking really good questions on here. I would say it would be to think about a change that you've had to go through as an individual. So I always want us to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're trying to lead through a change. So it's like, think back to the time that you wanted to make this change, and just first close your eyes and think about like, how did it feel initially? Like, what were your thoughts and feelings around it? What did it take to go from, okay, I want to make this change, to I'm going to take that first step to make the change? And then how did that feel? And then the progression of it. Because if you can put yourself back into that world, right, you're then getting behind the psychology and like, all right, this is how I felt. This is what I did. So that the next time you have to have a conversation with somebody about change, you're going to be able to approach it from a more holistic perspective. You are going to have empathy. I know I've used that word a lot on this podcast. I think it's such an important, it's not a soft skill, it's a strategic skill. Like, if you lack empathy in the CS world, it's not going to help you do your job well and do right by your customers. And so I think we could all dial up our empathy when it comes to change management, is think about like, what motivated you? Because that probably one thing or two things that motivated you could probably help motivate somebody else. So it's always like, just think about that first, and then that'll help you go into the conversation with just a more clear picture on, okay, I've been in this person's shoes. Maybe I should share the last time I had to do this and how it felt and what worked for me, and see if maybe that works for them. If not, ask them what would help them work through the change.
Oh, that was awesome, Eleni. And, we started this whole podcast by talking about Casey only reading the terms and conditions for his marriage. And I'm pretty sure he's in breach of contract with a recent change he's made with that mustache. So maybe he needs to think about a change he recently went through and the impacts it's having on his own life. So, Eleni, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And if people want to get in touch with you, where should they look to find you?
Oh, our favorite place, LinkedIn. Woohoo!
Love it. Good deal. Everybody go follow Eleni on LinkedIn. And thanks so much for joining us, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.